Lanci.
Hey, this is Brett Kissel, and you're listening to the Sean Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Thursday. How's everybody doing today? Did you know you can hold physical gold and silver in your registered accounts? I'm talking RRSP, TFSA, RIF, or Kids RESP by adding physical gold and silver to your accounts. Yes, this year's RRSP deadline. Man, I can't wait for the deadline to get passed so I could stop saying RRSP. Acronyms. Deadline for this year, March 3rd. Yes, March 3rd is you can make any, once you get your money in, once your contribution is made, you can invest into physical precious metals at any time. And of course, I'm going to tell you all about Silver Gold Bull. They are the company I recommend here out of Alberta. And, today's guest, I'll get to that in a second. But certainly when it comes to buying, selling, storing precious metals, they can help you with their in-house solutions. Just text or email Graham down in the show notes for any details or questions you have around investing in precious metals and for feature silver deals exclusively offered to you, the SNP listener. If you're on SGB, make sure to reference you heard about them on the SNP. When it's January in Lloydminster, there are two things you can count on. Freezing cold weather, check. It's February, but regardless, it is cold. And it looks like we got cold for another week or so. And Guardian Plumbing and Heating. These guys have been around keeping homes, farms, and businesses running smoothly since 2010. And one of the things that really sets Guardian apart is how they make life easier for you, their customers. They've got technicians on shift 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every single day, including weekends, and they don't charge you anything extra for evening or weekend service. That means you can get the help you need on your schedule without worrying about surprise costs. And farmers, this one's just for you. The Guardian efficient grain dryers and Guardian power stations aren't just available here. They're available all across Canada. So don't matter where you're sitting there, farmers, they can get it to you. The power station is an absolute game changer, giving you 2-for-1 utilities, heat and electricity from the same reliable system. It's an innovative way to keep your operation running efficiently and save on energy costs. If you want to find out more, you can always just text me and I can steer you on to Blaine or Joey, or you can go to guardianplumbing.ca. Substack, it's free to subscribe to. What are you waiting for? I have no idea. I've been talking about this for a while. There's like 4,000 plus people on that sucker. You should be one of them. And that way you can get caught up on the week in review. I hear it all the time. Sean, you do 5 shows a week. I don't know how to keep up. Simple. Subscribe to a free email that you get emailed once a week at 5 p.m. on Sundays, and you're literally going to get a 2 to 3 minute video that's going to break down what went on during the week on the podcast. Simple. Subscribe. Down in the show notes. Cornerstone Forum 2025 is heading to Calgary, Alberta. It's going to be a ton of fun. What are you waiting on? Tickets down in the show notes. Yes. And it's going to be, it's going to be a ton of fun. I'm excited for it. I get asked about the venue and everything, and I've been looking at pictures and how this place is going to be coming together. You're going to want to be in this room. And don't feel bad. If you're like, just me coming by myself, kind of feel awkward. One of the beautiful things about this event is the community. You'll be at some table with a bunch of random strangers, and I promise you, you're going to get welcomed right in. That's what the SMP community is all about. We are an eclectic bunch, aren't we? Holy Mackinac. Some of you are just brilliant. Most of you are smarter than me. That's, I don't know if that's saying much, but regardless, my hat's off to all of you. The new studio is coming here in 2025. This cold weather is not helping us out, folks. Skills, labor, materials, money, a value for value wall with your name on it if you can provide one of those. And as a lovely lady texted me, how about prayers? I would take prayers. I would take some prayers about this and about the Cornerstone Forum if you're willing. All right, that's all I got for you today. Let's get on to that. Actually, if you're listening or watching on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. If you're on X, retweet this sucker. Let's get out to a bigger audience, folks. All right, on to that tale of the tape. The first has been trading commodities for 20 plus years and is a managing partner at Echobay Partners. The second is a managing partner and director at Silver Gold Bull. I'm talking about Vince Lanci and Nick Morianos. So buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to the Sean Newman Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Vince Lanci and Nikolas Morianos. So, boy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, for anyone who wants to go back, Vince was back a long time ago. It's a while back. Number 548, and then Nick not that far back, 753. I forget what today marks, 796. I want to say. Regardless, if you're wanting a little more in depth on who Vince is or Nick is for that matter, hop back to those episodes, folks. That's the easiest way to do it. Today we're going to start out with tariffs. We're going to see where it gets us to. But certainly, Vince, I want to pick your brain, and Nick, feel free to hop in if anything sticks out to you. But I want to start with tariffs, right? Trump's talking about 25% tariffs. I know we got a 30-day reprieve. We got a new border czar or fentanyl czar here in Canada. Just what does it look like if anything like a 25% tariff or any form of tariff gets enacted on Canadian stuff on us?
Okay, so just looking at the relationship between Canada and the U.S., just on broad tariffs, it is my opinion, and other people who are even more well versed in this, that the Trump's big picture plan is to make America great, is all about protectionism, which is mercantilism, and part of that would potentially be raising tariffs. Now, without getting into the economics of it, you just have to look at the picture like this. Who's the only real trade problem? That's China, in my opinion. I don't see how it could be anywhere else. And the other trade problem is made up. Okay, so Trump is trying to get little tiny wins under his belt before he goes to China. So in a world the world is fragmented. Globalization is falling by the wayside. And when globalization falls by the wayside, regionalism increases. So you have to reshore your supply chains. You have to onshore your supply chains. And that means your best friend is Canada and Mexico for the United States. So it would behoove you to embrace your neighbors geographically, because geography is economics now, geoeconomics. And then once you solidify yourself on your own continent or hemisphere, let's say, then you go after the big boss. Trump tactically comes in backwards. He's all stick and then carrot on the back end. Now, what it means to Canada in general, I mean, look, I don't think we're going to have 25% tariffs on Canada, but tariffs on Canada is a means to an end. I believe he just wants to publicly win so he can unify he has to unify this continent before going after China. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but specifically, can you be more specific on the Canada-U.S. relationship? Are we talking about precious metals or things in general here?
I think it could be general. I mean, I think when you look at it from the perspective of a Canadian business owner, and just a resident, a citizen of the country, the uncertainty is just off the charts. We can't even get a straight answer on what the reason is for the tariffs. You hear fentanyl. You don't really hear as much about money laundering, but you have to think that plays a key component because so much of it ties back to mainland China. Is it simply this $200 billion trade deficit, which, I mean, for all intents and purposes, the delta there is energy exports into the United States. So it doesn't seem like the harshest of the bunch. It's just there's no clarity as to the why in order for us to come to an understanding. And we don't know if our politicians are simply gaslighting us right now by saying, obfuscating and just causing a shit show in the national conversation, or if they actually know what's going on and they just want to provoke a fight. Like we have no insight here in the country. It's quite something.
I can actually talk. Canada's harder for me to talk about than the rest of the world because I don't really see a problem there. So as you said, fentanyl, that's whatever. You can make the case about it's like bootlegging with the Canadian border. I think, well, starting with metals as a finished product, it's bullish for precious metals and it's bullish for oil. What it really comes down to is if we do a universal tariff. Let's start with this. Let me start over. There's been talk of a universal tariff. I'm going to tariff everyone on this. That's not going to happen. I mean, it could happen, but I don't think that's going to happen. And even though there's been talk of it, I think the tariff is going to be on items. I don't think Trump can afford to do universal tariffs because of his agenda down the road. So here's what I mean. The day that he said the tariffs start today with Mexico and Canada, what happened? Stocks dropped, oil rallied. We don't care about metals for this part. He can't afford to have stocks drop and oil rally as he's doing his agenda. He needs cheap oil and he needs stocks to stay stable to get what he wants. So I don't think it's practical, or however you want to say that word, for him to get what he wants to get done with Canada. I do think that what he's doing is he's picking fights with people who really can't afford to lose. He's bullying. And in the end, he has a history of coming out aggressive, declaring victory, and then giving a much bigger carrot behind the scenes than we would have. So he would have you believe. I have to recalibrate on this.
Do you think this is really about Trump meaningfully trying to bring manufacturing back into the United States? And do you think that the tariffs are just a way of shocking central banks around the world into potentially reacting and, let's say, lowering interest rates, weakening their currencies, and in order to offset the costs in the interim? Like, what do you think he's really about?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. The world has, here's the picture. You can look at Canada and the U.S. in this picture. The world has changed, okay? The West has been surviving as a service economy. Canada is not a service economy, but the U.S. is very service economy oriented, and that's no longer working. And as a result of that, we need to manufacture again. So we need to reshore and onshore our manufacturing. And the reason we need to do that is because there's no more trust. So starting before, but the epicenter or the ground zero for these changes is the Russian-Ukraine war. Now, when that war starts, we seize their assets. We destroy the global trust. Now, every country around the world, including Canada, on some level is saying, well, if he threatens tariffs, then he could also threaten sanctions and go up the scale. But the tariff, to answer Nick's point, his plan is to bring manufacturing back. Okay, so he wants to start putting factories here. In order to do that, he needs to protect our industries. I mean the whole continent. In order to protect the industries, you raise tariffs on foreign goods, very much like the colonial days. We no longer will buy your tables. We have to make our own tables out of our own wood. And whether that is successful or not remains to be seen. But the tariffs are a form of pushing back against the weakening dollar. All right, now, I haven't said this before, but I'm going to say it now. As the world becomes multipolar, the dollar has less power over those currencies, as Nick was bringing up. We can't look, if China's no longer owning dollars and they're owning gold instead of dollars as a reserve asset, then how do we get to them? We get to them with tariffs, right? Trade works with money. That's the payment chain, and the supply chain, that's the tariff. We give you the table, you give us the money. Well, the dollar is no longer affecting those countries, and so we're trying to use tariffs to protect our own. I feel like I'm all over the place on this. That's because I'm thinking of a lot of things at the same time. But Trump has, I'm going to go back to something I talked about before to put a finer point on this. Trump has a limited amount of time to get done what he wants to get done, number one. And what he wants to get done is convert the economy in a manufacturing way. He has a mandate, and that mandate will expire as the midterms for American politicians comes. And so he's coming out of the gate aggressively with tariffs, although I don't really think he means it. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, I could be wrong, but let's assume that I'm wrong. He needs to unite the continent and then put China in its place. He needs to do that because then he will be able to lower taxes. So, simply put, in order to succeed to rebuild the U.S. economy, he needs to reduce the deficit. He has proposed that he can reduce the deficit by getting other people to pay us tariffs. And once they start paying us tariffs, then he can also lower taxes. That's not going to happen the way he wants it to. What's going to happen is he needs the U.S. dollar to weaken. In order for the U.S. dollar to weaken, he needs oil to be cheaper. I guess what I'm saying is I'm already at the point where Trump's running out of time, Nick.
I really can see that. No, I can totally see that.
Well, when you say he's already running out of time, and you both go, oh, yeah, I can totally see that. I sit here and I go, how's that possible? He's literally been in office for like less than a month. How is he already running out of time, Vince?
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like it's when I think
it
when
sounds
I hear
nuts, but it makes sense. Go for it.
For 2 weeks. You know? Okay, here's why. The first 100 days of a president's mandate is when he has to get something done. So Obama did the American Health Care Act, Obamacare, however you want to characterize it. The first 100 days is when people get out of your way. And instead of getting those things done, he's been basically shotgunning or spraying everything. So it's kind of like a spray and pray thing. He started out with tariffs, and what are we talking about now? U.S. aid, which might be legitimate, but it's not what needs to get done. So as the 100-day deadline progresses, all the senators who are up for re-election will start to look at him as a lame duck, not as a mandate. Okay, so I just see a trend. The reason I say that I think he's losing ground, I could be wrong, is that he came out with tariffs. I thought he would close a deal on tariffs, meaning the tariffs would go down. He'd negotiate with Canada. He'd negotiate with Mexico. And then he'd come out saying Canada is great, Mexico is great, there's no tariffs, we're on the same board. This whole hemisphere is, manifest destiny plus Monroe Doctrine. And now we're going to go after what we need to go after outside of the U.S. But he hasn't done that. He's been redirecting almost like someone who's on Adderall. And I think he's losing focus over it. I mean, I'm not here to judge Trump.
It could also
say that. Yes.
No, I was going to say it could also be that he's just been given too many problems. Like when he just at the end of the Biden administration, when they were talking about sort of Trump proofing the world, they just had, use the analogy of a shotgun. Well, they had shotgunned problems everywhere. So he came in, he's being asked to solve the Ukraine crisis. He's being asked to solve the Middle East. I mean, he obviously rattled all kinds of cages by saying, I want to take over Greenland and Canada should be the 51st state, et cetera.
Right.
But the other thing that isn't talked about is the fact that he has a slim majority in Congress and the Senate, but are they real majorities? Especially where, yesterday, and God bless him, you see Elon Musk come out and he says, we're going to investigate how some of these bureaucrats, Congress people, senators have enriched themselves so tremendously off of these relatively small salaries. Well, that isn't that it doesn't go along party lines. Like that goes both ways. When you look at that list, it's almost equally made up of Republicans and
that list, the 7 or 8 entities that are like a third are Republican and 2/3 are Democrat. It's pathetic.
The the point is, like, he can't even put things to Congress. He can't put forward ideas for legislation and have his top generals go out and rally the troops and pass legislation. Like, he has to do everything through executive order because he knows he doesn't really have the majorities that on paper it appears that he has. So it is tough. Like, if they get through the midterms and they solidify their lead, well, it's different. I mean, I think he'll get another rejuvenation. But to Vince's point, once you get through 100 days, and if you're reading your zero hedges and whatever, they're telling you the same thing. He's got to get a lot done. But right now, like, Christ, for a guy that doesn't sleep but 4 hours a day or whatever it is, like, he still has too much on his plate probably to try and tackle. And again, coming back full circle, I'm sure, this little cabal of politicians, they know a lot more than they let on, but I'm sure to some extent they're kind of wondering, where the hell is he coming from? And what exactly does he want right now? Because everybody's on their toes. Like, nobody can sustain this kind of a pace, whether they're the ones that's instigating it or the ones that are receiving it. It's quite something.
I agree that he's inherited several disasters that he has to unwind, and he campaigns on fixing those, and he's actually working towards doing that. The big thing is he has to reduce spending, but at the same time rebuild manufacturing, and that's the hard thing. He needs to. The tariffs on Canada, he needs to. In the end, there will be no tariffs on Canada and no tariffs on Mexico. We will continue to colonize Latin America. Argentina is our ally. Follow Elon here. It's like a little sidebar. Follow Elon Musk around the world, and that's what we're concerned with. So, for example, Argentina. When Milei won, that was a sign that Trump could win. Okay, we're looking at Venezuela. We're looking at Brazil in our region. For example, we're friends with El Salvador now, right? El Salvador has described a huge gold finding. Well, you know what usually occurs with gold? Lithium. Lithium and gold can concurrently occur in areas like that. So we want lithium. We're securing natural resources in our hemisphere. So the tariffs on regional countries for us is not going to happen. Once we fix our supply chains, then we can do what we want. That's his real duty. His real duty is to fire half the government, right? Simplifying it. Fire half the government, secure the supply chains locally, build the manufacturing back, and then go out and sell things to the world. That's what he needs to do. But the moving parts associated with that are how is he going to do the manufacturing? He has to spend money. Where is he going to get the money for the manufacturing? Well, he's going to do it in tariffs. That's not going to work. It's not going to work. It'll cause a global recession. He's going to do it by firing people in the economy, like cutting government down. Yeah, that would work. It would be very Volcker-esque, and he would need pal to eat. So he's inherited a Fed that doesn't like him. He's inherited the border problem. He's inherited fentanyl, which is related to the border problem. And he's inherited a deficit where the Biden administration spent hand over fist, but on nothing appreciable. I agree. I know it's early, right? And it's still less than 100 days. He needs a win. He's not going to get it in Canada. He's not going to get it in Mexico. He's not going to get it from PAL. He's pushing on walls, and he's going to get it somewhere, and it might be Ukraine and PAL. Putin. So once he gets a win, then I think he has a chance of keeping people in the midterm on his side, and so then the second part of his term would work. I like what Scott Bessent wants to do, even though he's universal tariff, he's pro universal tariff. But I think Scott Bessent is the person that can make all this work. And that's it. It's an unnecessarily complicated situation because of the way the news cycle operates. But the situation is the U.S. is going through an inflationary, secular inflationary spiral as we re-gauge ourselves to go back to manufacturing. So it's like the 70s in reverse. We have inflation to get out of financialization and service and to create more manufacturing. And in order to do that, we need to secure our supply chain.
I mean, ultimately, if he has he has a country to the north of him, which is what we can speak to, which has a lot of the things that he needs. Like he's very flippant in the way that he talks, and obviously, not being a politician myself, you can get caught up in the what did he say today game. But he says, well, we don't need Canadian oil, and then he goes and talks immediately. He'll talk to Maduro in Venezuela, or he'll talk to MBS out in Saudi Arabia, and he'll be like, oh, well, let's cut a deal. And of course, that puts everybody on their heels. But he does have everything that he needs just north of the border. You want to cut out the last piece of the Russian puzzle that you need, uranium, you've got it in Saskatchewan. Oil, what, third, fourth biggest reserve in the world? Here where we are, basically right under our feet in Alberta. But it's just one of those things where you need people that want to play ball on the other side. And it just doesn't seem like at the moment he has people up here that want to. Mexico, it feels like Mexico is willing to cave. They'll cave quick. But in Canada,
that's where the fentanyl is coming in, and that's where the immigration is coming in. I agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think Sean alluded to this. I believe it was just before we started recording that, he was speaking to Sam Cooper. Sam Cooper's like a preeminent in Canada investigative reporter. He's cut his teeth on this for over a decade, specifically money laundering and fentanyl. There's a lot more here than we could even scratch the surface on. I mean, Canada, we don't even have RICO laws. Like, you're a New York guy, you understand RICO inside and out. Like, we don't have that. So our country, and the more you look at it, I mean, it's not a new phenomenon. This goes back hundreds of years. We've been used as a staging ground for all kinds of nonsense. Initially for the crown, fast forward, now it's China or both. We seem to be a playground for other people. We're still fortunate to have the lifestyle that we have, even though it's being eroded at a phenomenal rate. But he probably does want to clean some of that stuff up. And if he just had a goddamn government up here that was willing to play ball, this could be a very harmonious situation. I don't know if it would be an American Union or something where we're sovereign, but we have a unified currency, what have you. There's just so many opportunities, but it's just between his boorishness and our, uselessness at the moment. It's a bad combo, a really bad combo.
Yeah. As you're saying this, I'm thinking of, there's a scene in The Godfather 2. You may or may not remember it, but there's a scene where Michael is in his, his study, and he's got his henchmen around him, and he's in charge. And Tom Hagen is sitting down, right? And Michael's eating an orange, and the way he's eating it just really personifies him. Just like people eating people's souls. It's just really, it's an evil moment. But the conversation goes like this: Michael wants to kill everyone. It seems like in this conversation, we're going to kill this guy. Hyman Roth was his main target, I think, in this conversation. And Tom Hagen is sitting down, his ally, his brother, from another mother, adopted brother, but his most loyal person. And Tom says, you don't have to kill this guy. He's out of the country. He's not coming back. And in front of everyone else, Michael shits on Tom Hagen and says, are you with us or not? Are you going to help me do, if the line is, are you going to help me do these things I've got to do or not? And I'm a big fan of the Tom Hagen character. In the book, he's a really good character. And what I see is Michael bullying someone who won't push back in order to gain street cred in the whole audience. And so I think that Trump is bullying someone who won't push back. I'm not saying you won't push back. I'm not saying you're not capable. I'm just saying that Trump's a bully, and he wants to get his way so he can look better to the outside world. And so if you had a harmonious government, ideologically, you wouldn't have this. And so what's he doing? He's pushing on someone who can push back, but won't make him look bad. And as a result of that, there is a false division here. The money laundering in Canada, I wasn't aware of that. I'm going to say I'm very naive on that.
Well, I mean, you look at the banks, Canadian banks in the United States. Like
Right.
they've been taken to the woodshed vis-a-vis, TD, for instance, recently, billions and billions in fines. Up here, it's ironic, right? I mean, in our industry, FinTrack is it's a force. It's, obviously we have to be very careful with it. We're extremely compliant, in our capacity, and that's actually part of my role. But it's just ironic that you look around and there's no end of op-eds, what have you, investigative journalists that are looking at this and saying, this is the source of the bubble in the biggest real estate bubble likely in the world, is the fact that we keep bringing money from overseas with dodgy sources, whether it's through casinos in Vancouver or what have you.
That's the Chinese money coming in by real estate, right?
What's that? Sorry?
That's the real estate bubble that's really been created by China expats just laundering their own money, right?
Well, exactly. But the unspoken problem in Canada is the fact that it's likely, and Trump. I mean, this is the interesting part of hearing the talking points from some of these people that are really, really close to the issue, is that the unspoken part is you pop this bubble and you wipe out 1 to 2 generations of Canadians who have put their life savings into their homes. And they've been under this perception, in particular in Vancouver and Toronto, where housing never goes down in price. You guys have pharma commercials in the United States. We have commercials here about getting a HELOC on your house. Like, that's what it is. It's like every second commercial is like Alpine Mortgage or something. You want to build a pool, home equity line of credit.
Piggy bank.
Exactly. So it's like I said, it's an interesting thing, and I wonder in some levels if he's biting off more than he can chew, because these are problems that can't get fixed very easily.
Maybe that's why he's being so obnoxious, because he's aware, he doesn't necessarily care about the money laundering. He looks at your economy as more precarious, kind of like we were in 2009 when our real estate bubble was collapsing. That's true. Your economy is natural resource based, and your wealth is real estate based. That's a big problem.
And if you look at our biggest city, or our 2 biggest cities, their economies are predominantly service based. Toronto doesn't produce anything. I mean, yeah, we have car manufacturing and sort of in the donut around it, but Toronto was built on lawyers, accountants, etc., service-based economy. So it's a bad mix. I mean, the one thing that I believe, and I'm no economist, but I see Canada as a prime country that could turn things around pretty quickly. I see the UK the exact opposite, diametrically opposite. I see the UK they don't have resources, they don't produce a whole lot. They do have the pound sterling in the city of London, but if that ever gets taken away from them, there's no energy inputs that are going to fix anything. There's no, like Germany, you put cheap energy into Germany again and it lights up. That muscle memory is there. All those manufacturing plants are there. You just need to turn them back on. Canada is the same, but it's just resources that we have. It's just, we've gotten so far away from that because of ideology or what have you.
It's interesting that you're putting it that way, because I'm looking at economies through those specters, through those lenses. So, for example, an emerging market, even as high as Russia, is a natural resource economy. They pull stuff out of the ground and they sell it for money, right? And a dictator, right, a person who's running a country like that, doesn't build anything. He's all about cash flow, right? So Canada, now a country that wants to grow something, right, they sell the natural resources and they invest in manufacturing. Canada is half England. It's all services based on financialization, and half emerging market. Now, that's not a slight. What I'm saying is, if you would, instead of taking the money out of the ground and selling it and financing the lawyers that are laundering the money, Canada would build a factory. It would be okay. It's like you're 2 ends of a barbell, and you need to just to build the middle out.
And the one thing that we have is we have a weakening currency. So, unless that has some sort of means of turning itself around, who knows? I've never really, again, it's not really my job to think of things like this, but maybe manufacturing could come back into a country like this if we've decided that we're just going to have a weaker currency.
Yeah, you'll be able to export more, but you won't be able to. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not saying you're wrong. Weaker currency is going to help you export more. But what are you exporting?
Well, nothing at the moment.
Right. Like the U.S. has the same problem, but at a different scale. So, for example, we don't make steel, and we're not going to make steel. We can't compete, just like you can't compete on the labor cost. So we can lower our currency to compete. What we need to do is we need to make things that the world wants or that the world needs. So specialty metals that go into hypersonic missiles, computer chips. Why are these things not in Canada? Why are these things not in Canada? Your government's not business friendly.
No.
Right? I'm like, why? Your standard of living is similar to ours. Your natural resources are more tapped than ours, more available than ours, and who the hell knows what else you have that you're just not looking at? And I'm like, wow, you guys are really screwed up because of government. Your government's really you can't.
But we have resources, and obviously we've got an interesting scenario, that's brewing where, taking your talking points that make total sense about the fact that the U.S. is going to need to weaken the dollar in order to affect a lot of the changes that they want to make in this administration. Well, that should at least bode well for our resources. I don't know how Trump's going to square oil and simultaneously lower the value of the U.S. dollar and lower oil. That's going to be interesting. But certainly with gold, which we don't own any of, but we have an abundance of in the ground, it does bode well.
Oh yeah, everyone likes to make statements in the U.S. Oh, you don't have any gold. Yeah, you do. You have plenty of gold. You haven't pulled it out of the ground yet.
You haven't pulled it out of the ground. Exactly.
So, believe me, you go around the world. A lot of these countries, mines are hedging gold that they haven't pulled out of the ground. Like that. All it is gold is it's in the earth. They pull it out and they put it in the earth somewhere else. So Canada's got plenty of gold. Canada's like a breeding ground for success. It's the people running it.
Vince, you're literally, oh my God, you're literally saying things where you're like, wait a second, you have everything there. Yes, we do. We have a bunch of morons who probably aren't morons. They're probably corrupt as you can get running our country. Right. And there's a reason why they're doing it this way. And the problem we have, I think, is well, how do we change that? I'm like listening to two guys go back and forth. I'm like, I have no idea how to change it. It's literally happening right in front of us. We have all the resources under the sun, but we can't do anything with it because our government says we can't or won't.
Well, I have a question about your government. I have a question about how your government works in terms of, it's really kind of impossible to get anything turned over quickly because of the parliamentary style, right? You have to govern by what's the word I'm looking for? Everyone agrees,
consent. Yeah.
Yeah. So why is Trump pushing on Canada, other than the fact that he wants to look tough, like he's attacking his best friend, Tom Hagen? Is he going to affect any change? I don't know. Canada's not going to spend any money. What are you going to do? Give us cheaper oil? It'd be funny if it ends with. Yeah, I'm sorry.
You already get cheaper oil.
Right.
That's like right. we don't work on WTI. We work on, what is that, Western Canadian Select. So we're already taking a discount to or you guys are getting a discount to
getting
WTI
a discount
when you're buying our oil. It could very well be.
Heavier oil is better for refining anyway. Sweet oil, WTI, isn't really good for refining. We prefer the heavier oil. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, it's a conundrum. It's funny to watch somebody look at the Canadian problem in real time and just twist themselves into knots, being like, "How are you so dysfunctional?" And I will disagree fundamentally with Sean. There, you never discount the fact that some of them are morons. I
Sure,
genuinely
sure.
think some of them are,
Right.
at least the
Right.
ones that are at the end of that sort of the puppet string being pulled and dancing. Like
Yeah.
they are
There is
fundamentally.
morons, but I mean, we like literally as we're sitting here, there's at least 11 MPs that have ties to China, or I should say, foreign influences. Okay, whatever you want to take that to mean. That they have not released their names that are still in acting government. I mean, they're prorogued right now, which means they're not there. But I mean, like, it's right in front of us. Like, we're being influenced by other nations that are not us. But if you go back through our history, that's always been the case. We've always been influenced by outsiders, which I think was one of the points Nick was alluding to. And so
Yeah.
you just get to the point right now where we're sitting here, and more Canadians are going like, but if we just did, why aren't we doing? No, we're not going to do that, right? Because one of the questions that got brought up with the 25% tariff was, oh, maybe we're finally going to get a pipeline across our country and have Canadian oil going across
Right.
country. And then Quebec comes down and says there will never be a pipeline come across Quebec. And you're like, okay, so okay, no, that's not happening, right? Like we're not gonna build out this nation that could be self-sufficient, if you would, and be a stronger ally to the United States. Why is that? Well, I would assume if I'm looking at the tea leaves, we're being influenced by outside sources all over the place.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and no, go for it.
Yeah. No. Good.
Well, I was going to say, I think, yeah, it could very well come back to the fact that we do have an influence problem. You know, Vince, you opened up with who's the big issue here? It's China. It's ironically, I mean, he did slap I think a 10% tariff on China, but he hasn't talked much about China. In fact, for the most part, when he talks about China, he talks about his glowing relationship with Xi Jinping and how they get on great, etc. It's kind of
He's want to be
ironic.
dictator. It seems.
What's that?
Weird. He's attacking his friends and he's uh,
Praising,
complimenting.
yeah,
Yeah.
his
Exactly.
natural rival. Yeah. So, but it could very well be that's it. Like he sees weakness up north, he sees influence up north. He may not know the extent to the influence, but who knows
Right.
what it is that he gets in his briefings. It could be more along the lines of the fact that they've got to get China out. And I've been sharing this with other people just because like it's the beauty of having a work environment like we have in our office where it's really open-minded, it's free thinking, and a lot of people of their own volition are out there just doing research on this stuff because they just want to satisfy their curiosities. But Russia giving China access to the Arctic where they don't otherwise have it. And the fact, I mean, when you look at Canada, well, we have a huge chunk of the Arctic, Greenland,
Yeah.
again, the Arctic, untapped resources. And if you want to talk about, strategic sort of landmass, vis-a-vis coming over with missiles, what have you, it could play a role. So in general, it could be that he's just like, I can't work with this particular government up north. They're weak anyways. We need them out, and we need somebody that's willing to play,
Right.
not just ball with the States, but ball with Trump. Because
Yeah. I'm thinking about the audiences here. Meaning when Trump says, let's tariff Canada, he's governing through populism, and so it plays well with Americans. Um, but and maybe it makes the government in Canada a little bit squirmy, but he's not thinking about the people that are actually considering the ramifications of it. And so that's what I'm saying is he's not blanket tariffs are not going to happen. I'll give you a real example that'll maybe take some of the pressure off of the tariff thing. He's gone from I'm going to have a universal tariff on the world, which is, there's risk to that, and it's inflationary for us, and it's depressionary for the rest of the world if you did that. So it's kind of like we're going to pay more for stuff, and we're going to make our own goods go up in price by doing that, and no one else will be able to sell stuff because we'll be buying less. So it's like, eggs are $50 a dozen. Okay, we'll eat less eggs. The chicken farmer goes out of business, and the people who have to buy eggs suffer. Okay, he goes from universal tariffs, which are still a possibility if you phase into them, to tariffing countries, right? To this is the progress. If you're looking for relief as a Canadian, here's his path. I'm going to tariff the world. I'm going to tariff the people that I feel like I can get away with the easiest. Behind the scenes, people push back. And then he says, I'm going to tariff energy. And he backs off on that. And then he says, I'm going to tariff metals. And he picks the metals that we don't import, aluminum and steel. And when he does that, he can say, I've successfully tariffed. We don't take any China steel. I've won over China. Great. We got our steel from the U.S. And we don't take any Canadian. I'm thinking some. We don't take any Canadian Hawaiian T-shirt. Or swimsuits. It's like saying I'm not going to buy any. I'm not going to buy my snowshoes from Aruba. I mean, he's tariffing things that he wins on because there's no pushback.
Well, it's like threatening Putin with another round of severe sanctions when the only thing left is uranium. You need it, and it makes up like $300 million in trade, which is a rounding error for most countries, much less the U.S.
It's funny if he shuts out Russia's uranium, then he's got to talk to Canada.
Yeah,
that's my point. He wants to get Canada and Mexico on his side before he wants to go to Putin and say, even though he's enamored with the guy, he wants to go to Putin and say, I don't need your uranium. I got Canada's. And he's starting by stick with Canada and Mexico. And if he doesn't get it, then that means his negotiation with Putin is going to be weak. And so, like you said, what's he going to do? Sanction Putin and sanction uranium? We saw what Putin did to Europe with natural gas. You think, okay, well, I won't send you natural gas anymore. That's the way it works. I think he's just playing to the home crowd now, without thinking about it.
Yeah, it sounds like you've made a strong case for the notion that he's got wins at home. Now he needs a big win abroad in order to kind of consolidate. Not just the American public is behind it, but now to really get people saying, oh God, just acquiesce quick because look at what he just did over here, whatever it might be. Just these are big deals. Like this solving this whole Russia thing is going to be just, a monster issue because you're not just going to get some sort of a cessation in military activity, and Russia wants a new security architecture. It's a completely different, order of magnitude larger. Like this is a big deal, and they're going to be big losers, and they're probably going to be, friends of the United States that end up the losers in that deal, just because Russia at the moment just doesn't seem to be, they're on the front foot. They've got probably most of the leverage here.
They do, militarily and geographically, and they have a banker. Their banker is China now. There's another Trump story that we've all lived through, although it may not have been front page news. During COVID, Trump went to Carrier Air Conditioning and Apple. He negotiated with them, and he cut a deal with them. He's a horse trader. He cut a deal where they would hire people and they would create more jobs and they would keep their prices at a certain level. And in return, he gave them tax abatements. And using Apple as an example, Apple didn't hire anyone. They were already scheduled to hire those people. They didn't even, it was like 11,000 people. They didn't hire them, but he'd already declared victory, moved on, and didn't care about the redaction or the negation on page 15 the next day of the newspaper. He moved on. So I think he's in the process of moving on with Canada. We're discussing it, and it's a real risk for us, but he's, maybe he's going to invade Grenada tomorrow. Greenland didn't work out. It starts with, gee, I'll invade that. Gaza, Grenada, Greenland. Like, there is a method. Okay, he's not an unguided missile this time, and the method is to keep them guessing. Carrot and stick. He starts with stick instead of carrot, right? Whereas Obama would start with carrot, and be quiet about the stick, and then he takes his wins and he leverages them elsewhere. But he doesn't have any wins yet. The only thing he has a win on now, I think, is USA turning out to be a real winner. And what's he want to do? He wants to reduce costs. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm making this up, but I wouldn't be surprised if, when this is over, the Keystone pipeline gets restarted, and we're paying for it. The U.S. is paying for it. Like, I kind of feel like
it's a strategic. It would be a strategic play. Energy security. Even though the U.S. has an abundant amount of energy, the amount that you're exporting to countries because our inept government won't allow us to do it gives you the opportunity to basically arbitrage that, where you can sell it to them at a premium and you can get it from us at a discount. And we just have to be happy because, that's the hand we're dealt, of course.
And it creates jobs.
It does.
So here's what I mean. Trump's a real estate guy. All he knows is the solution to every problem is building. Whenever peace is made with Canada, not that there's war, it'll be papered over with something being built. Maybe it'll be a Trump hotel, who knows? But something will be built. The solution to everything is building for him, and so he's going to build something. I don't really think he's going to be able to do what he wants without a weaker dollar now. If he doesn't have a weaker dollar now, he's going to get a weaker dollar later. That's a strong opinion I have, and that's basically based on this. If he can't get tariffs passed, let's assume he's not. Let's say they're not. He can't have tariffs offset lost tax revenues on income tax. Okay, so that doesn't work. So his spending budget is higher than everyone else's, higher than Biden's. Okay, but it's what he's spending on that everyone is excited about. So, me tariffing Canada, the purpose of tariffs is, if I can tariff successfully a country, I can lower income taxes in the U.S. I can also encourage the nations that have companies that we buy stuff from to move their industry here. So why is he tariffing Canada? What industry does he want? He wants the oil. He's just being a bully. I can't. I don't like the way he's handling. Yeah.
That point dovetails really nicely, though. You bringing up the lower dollar with bringing your specialty back in, which is commodities,
right.
And obviously gold fix. So where do you see? I mean, I have a pretty strong idea of where you see it, but maybe you can explain it. Where do you see us going in the next, say, 12, 24 months and onward with regards to commodities, let's say silver and gold? And then also, I mean, for us up here, I think a lot of people that are in the, slightly in the know on what's going on south of the border are looking at Besant and saying, what is all this about a sovereign wealth fund in the US? And, there's been all this hullabaloo about, Trump being pro Bitcoin, which is super, but I believe I've heard and I've read that Besant has some sort of a background in gold, or he's looked at gold favorably within his portfolio. So maybe you can touch on that. I'm curious.
Let me start with the sovereign wealth fund, just to put it in perspective. The picture that you're talking about is Trump signing the sovereign wealth fund executive order. Besant on one side and Lutnick on the other. Besant is a gold bug. It was one of his biggest, if not his biggest holdings in his hedge fund. So he's a hard money guy. And then Lutnick on the other side, or stage right, is a Bitcoin guy. He likes Bitcoin, but he's a treasury guy, right? So he knows that we can use treasuries to, it's almost like you're going to use Tether to buy our treasuries because no one else will, to buy Bitcoin. So a sovereign wealth fund, and I've actually joked about it, a sovereign wealth fund can do whatever it wants. The U.S., I mean, I don't want to be black and white around it. We can have a sovereign wealth fund, but it's probably the worst idea in the world for the U.S. to have a sovereign wealth fund.
Okay.
And no, and I'll tell you why. A sovereign wealth fund, for those not familiar, a sovereign wealth fund allows a nation to do what it wants. It allows a nation to take risk. So if you're a communist, authoritarian country, a socialist country, a sovereign wealth fund makes sense because you need to buy something that's going to grow. You're not just buying your own bonds, right? So a sovereign wealth fund is generally most advantageous to a country that does not have manufacturing, has natural resources, and has free positive cash flow from it, right? Now, the United States. Financially, you shouldn't have a sovereign wealth fund if you don't have a positive capital account, and we don't. We're borrowing. But more practically, a sovereign wealth fund can do whatever it wants. The whole point of our government, the U.S. government, is the people can do whatever they want, allegedly. And the government's supposed to be stable in the backstop, right? How does the nation grow its GDP? By its companies doing well. Do you want a constitutional republic, a democratic republic, for lack of a better word, investing in stocks that it's a leveraged play on our economy, and it's dangerous. We shouldn't do it. We shouldn't have a sovereign wealth fund. I don't want to get into the minutia of it, but we should have a sovereign wealth fund. But it's possible because it gives us more leverage over other countries. We can go and we can buy stock in another country. We can sell oil short. We can buy calls on gold. Do you really want these knuckleheads to have that power? I don't. I just don't, because I'd rather do it myself. It's the opposite of the libertarian mindset. The other topic, help me, what was the other topic? Because I was thinking about
just how you see commodities, gold, silver, et cetera, in the next 12, 24 months.
The next 12 months, next 24 months. Okay, so I'll give you two paths. Trump's path that works and Trump's path that doesn't. Okay, so Trump's path that works is he negotiates through tariffs or protectionism or whatever, a deal that slows down the battle between the U.S. and China, right? Nothing happens here between Canada and the U.S. or the U.S. and Mexico. Nothing. Everything's copacetic. That's what happens. And he reduces our deficit by creating jobs and manufacturing. Now, he does that by spending money without bonds getting worse. He's not going to get any tariffs. He's not going to get any revenue from it. He's going to need to get the money elsewhere. So he has to go to the debt market. And in order to go to the debt market, he needs PAL to lower rates. So he needs low energy, low rates, and manufacturing increasing. And if he can't get those three things, he can't get what he wants to get done. So if he's successful in the first 2 years, we should have a weaker dollar. A weaker dollar. That's your tell. If the dollar weakens in the first 2 years, then he has a chance of succeeding. Because in the last 2 years, it will strengthen. Very Reagan-esque, okay? We raised rates, the dollar got strong, and then as we lowered rates aggressively, the dollar weakened, and we exported our way out of the economy, out of the recession, as we created the investment vehicles. If he's not successful, the dollar remains strong. As long as the dollar remains strong, he will not be successful. So, in very simple terms, if the dollar remains strong, the world economy weakens. If the world economy weakens, then we can't get tax revenues and we can't rebuild manufacturing. We can't do anything.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Which means all of us, the whole world will have to ease aggressively in the next 2 years. So if the dollar remains strong now, the world will fight recession, and in doing that, they'll have to lower interest rates. So let's say there's only two countries in the world, Canada and the U.S., right? We say we're going to put a 50% tariff on, Canadian coffee, right? Peach or something like that, right? And you say, fine, we're just going to weaken our currency. And so the price remains the same. Your standard of living drops, okay? Our standard of living is okay because we have the global reserve currency. We can take it a little bit longer than you can. But the money that we're making from it, we're going to rebuild our manufacturing. If you don't lower your currency, your economy collapses. If you look at the rest of the world, while we're raising rates, the rest of the world is lowering rates right now because they're expecting tariffs to hurt. So the longer the dollar remains strong now, the weaker it will be later. Okay, if he weakens it now, we'll be okay later because the weak dollar will enable us to finance our investment in ourselves. Kind of a little bit convoluted. I'm not on my best game here today, guys. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's just interesting because we've seen, for instance, back to gold, you've seen gold going up with the dollar for quite a long period of time, where normally it's looked at as, very simply as a hedge against currency weakness. Right. So the long and the short of it in our world is it just seems like, and it has been a great time to just own it. But yeah, the next little while, there's so much uncertainty, and then throw into the fact that we are, what is it, like I've heard something like 16 years into like a secular bull market in equities. Like we are due for some sort of a correction. So he's coming in under really strong headwinds and a very toppy market and trying to put it all together. And then your regular person out there is just trying to game plan. Well, how the hell do I get through this? How do I navigate this for my family and to weather this storm that we inevitably are going through, in particular, if you're not in the United States?
Yeah, that's actually, you make a good point, because I think when people talk about the gold's going up with the dollar, and Americans will talk about it that way. If you look at it from another country's point of view, right? And if you need dollars to buy stuff for your country, let's say the dollar is what you have to buy stuff with, and let's say you're a BRICS country, and historically in a global world, gold goes down when the dollar goes up because it's denominated in dollars. But now gold is going up with the dollar, so now I'm an emerging market or a third world country, and I need dollars to pay my bills, and the dollar's going up, and I look at gold and I go, oh, my gold must be doing shitty. And I look at it, it's going up. And the reasons for that is because the world is splitting in two. There are two currencies now. There's the dollar in the Western Hemisphere. This is where it's going to end up. There's going to be the fiat dollar in the Western Hemisphere and the gold dollar in the Eastern Hemisphere. So if you're an individual in the West, you need to own gold or miners as a hedge for, believe it or not, even though the dollar is strong, let's say we're all getting paid in US dollars, you need to be able to afford the things that we buy from other countries. In the East, they have all the raw materials, we'll say, but they don't have any financialization. So they need to buy stocks. We need to buy gold. They need to buy stocks. And Canada's economically in the middle of that. You need to buy gold and stocks. The other thing is, I think, and this is, here's my next 12 months to 24 months. If the dollar goes up, gold will continue to go up. And if the dollar goes down, gold will continue to go up. And that sounds really simple and facile. And here's the reason for the weird thing. Right? If the dollar continues to go up against G7 countries, I mean the DXY, not all countries. Like the dollar is going up against Europe, right? The dollar is going up against Canada. The dollar is not going up against the BRICS. It's not, going up against Australia. It's not going up against yuan. The dollar is reflecting our dominance in the Western Hemisphere, and gold is reflecting their dominance in the Eastern Hemisphere. And so, as the dollar keeps going up, the people in the East are just going to keep selling it and buying gold with it because they don't want dollars anymore since the Russian thing. In the West, as the dollar goes up, most of your neo-Keynesians are like, it'll come back down. It'll come back down. It's not, because we're not the buyers anymore. The wealth is going east. And so that's it. I believe that until we get to a new equilibrium where the world has enough gold or enough substitute, could be Bitcoin for all I know, substitute for U.S. Treasuries, then gold and hard assets will go up at the expense of abstract assets like dollars. So that's it. I think miners are the next thing to move. Everyone's been saying that for years. I've never been long miners.
Massive disclaimer. Stay away from them unless you know what you're doing.
But I have a position. I just bought miners and I just sold tech stocks. That's not my idea. That comes from indirectly from Bank of America's Michael Hartnett, whose work I respect. So that's it.
Vince, Nick, appreciate you doing this today. And Vince, I meant to chime in earlier. Like, I'm not on my game. I'm like, I think this has been a fascinating conversation. I appreciate you hopping on this side. Nick, you as well. And hopefully we can do it again here in the future. But either way, Vince, we're looking forward to seeing you up in Calgary May 10th. So that's going to be, if people didn't clue in on that, Vince is going to be in Calgary, Alberta at the Cornerstone Forum May 10th. So that'll be a lot of fun as well.
Thank you for having me. I have a topic. I'm not going to discuss it here, but I have a topic that I'm in the process of writing on. So I'd like to share it with both of you when the time comes. And it's going to be precious metals based, but more conceptual. So let me run it by you first. So thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, gents.